Warren Buffett once said something that made me realize I've been thinking about money completely wrong. I found 6 other billionaires who share the same twisted psychology about money that nobody talks about. These are the actual mental tricks they use to think differently than 99% of people. After studying 7 billionaires for 3 months, I discovered they don't just have more money. They think about money in ways that seem insane to most people. Once you understand these tricks, you can't unsee them, and the 7th one is so counterintuitive it changed how I handle my own finances. Most people think rich versus poor is just about having money, but the real difference is mental. I was copying what billionaires did, not how they think. That's where these 7 psychological tricks come in. Trick number 1, the delayed gratification reversal. Most people think billionaires are good at delayed gratification. You know, they sacrifice now to get rewards later. But that's not actually what's happening in their minds. Jeff Bezos doesn't feel like he's sacrificing when he reinvests Amazon profits instead of taking them out. Warren Buffett doesn't feel deprived when he lives in the same house he bought in 1958. Here's the psychological trick. They've rewired their brains to get pleasure from the process of building wealth, not from spending it. When you or I see a fancy car, we think, I want that. When Buffett sees a fancy car, he literally thinks, that's $100,000 I could invest that would become $1.6 million in 30 years. But here's what's really wild. He's not forcing himself to think that way. That thought genuinely excites him more than the car would. He's trained his brain to get a dopamine hit from compound interest instead of from buying stuff. You can do this too. Start small. When you see something you want to buy, calculate what that money could become if you invested it instead. At first, it'll feel forced, but if you do it enough times, your brain starts to rewire itself. The investment potential becomes more exciting than the purchase. But wait until you hear what happens when billionaires completely flip how they think about failure. Because what I'm about to show you next will make you question everything you thought you knew about setbacks. Trick number 2, the failure reframe system. Normal people see failure as proof that they're not cut out for success. Billionaires have completely flipped this script in their minds. Elon Musk has failed more spectacularly than most people have even tried. Tesla almost went bankrupt multiple times. SpaceX's first 3 rockets exploded. PayPal was nearly shut down by the government. But here's the psychological trick. Musk doesn't see these as failures. In his mind, they're data points. Each failure eliminates one way that doesn't work, bringing him closer to the way that does work. It's like he's playing a video game where every death teaches you something new about the level. Most people's internal voice says, I failed. Maybe I'm not good at this. Billionaires have trained their internal voice to say, I found another way that doesn't work. I'm getting closer to the solution. This isn't just positive thinking. It's a complete rewiring of how they process setbacks. When Richard Branson's Virgin Cola failed to compete with Coca-Cola, he didn't think, I'm bad at business. He thought, now I know more about the beverage industry than I did before. The trick is to literally change your language. Instead of saying, I failed, say, I gathered data. Instead of, this didn't work, say, this approach has been eliminated. It sounds silly, but language shapes thought, and thought shapes action. Now, this next psychological trick is going to sound completely backwards, and it involves a mental switch that most people never make about their most valuable resource. Trick number 3, the scarcity abundance flip. This one's going to sound backwards, but stay with me. Most people think billionaires have an abundance mindset about money. Actually, they have a scarcity mindset about time and an abundance mindset about opportunity. Bill Gates famously said he could never understand people who say they're bored because there are so many interesting things to learn and do. In his mind, time is the scarcest resource, not money. Money can be made, lost, and made again. Time only goes in one direction. This creates a psychological flip that changes everything. When time is your scarcest resource, you become incredibly selective about how you spend it. You stop doing things that don't move the needle. You delegate or eliminate tasks that others can do. You focus only on what you uniquely can contribute. But here's where it gets interesting. When you treat time as scarce, you start seeing money-making opportunities everywhere. Because you're not wasting time on low-value activities, your brain has space to notice patterns and opportunities that busy people miss. Warren Buffett spends most of his day reading and thinking. That seems lazy to people who are rushing around all day, being productive. But that thinking time is where he spots undervalued companies that everyone else misses. His scarcity around time creates abundance in opportunity. Think of it like this. Imagine your attention is a flashlight in a dark room full of treasure. Most people wave their flashlight around frantically, catching glimpses of shiny objects, but never really seeing anything clearly. Billionaires point their flashlight at one corner at a time and study it completely before moving on. They see fewer things, but they see them clearly enough to know which ones are actually valuable. But here's where it gets really crazy. The next trick reveals how billionaires make decisions that have nothing to do with how much money they have. Trick number 4, the identity economics shift. Here's something nobody talks about. Billionaires don't make money decisions based on what they can afford. They make decisions based on who they are. This is a massive psychological difference. When most people see a $200 dinner, they think, $200 is a lot of money, can I afford this? When billionaires see a $200 dinner, they think, am I the type of person who spends $200 on dinner? The question isn't about the money, it's about identity. Oprah Winfrey doesn't buy expensive things because she has money. She has money because she became the type of person who makes decisions based on value creation, not price tags. The psychology came first, the money followed. This explains why lottery winners usually go broke. They get the money, but they keep the same identity. They're still people who think, I can't afford that, or I should buy this while I can. They never become people who think, does this align with who I am? Here's a story that perfectly illustrates this. In 2013, comedian and actor Kevin Hart was worth maybe $15 million. Not poor, but not billionaire rich either. He was offered $40 million to star in a sequel to one of his hit movies. Most people would jump at that money. Hart turned it down. Not because he couldn't use the money, but because he said, I'm not the type of person who makes movies just for money. I only make movies I believe in. That decision seemed crazy to outsiders, but it was pure identity economics. Hart knew that becoming someone who chases quick paydays would change who he was as an artist and a businessman. Today, he's worth over $200 million, largely because he consistently makes decisions based on identity, not immediate money. The trick is to start making small decisions based on identity instead of affordability. Ask yourself, what would someone who's building wealth do? Instead of, can I afford this? When you consistently act like the person you want to become, your brain starts to believe that's who you are, and then your financial results start to match. Speaking of compound effects, what I'm about to show you next will change how you see everything in your life, not just money. Trick number 5. The compound interest mindset. Expansion. Most people understand compound interest mathematically. Billionaires understand it psychologically. They don't just apply it to money, they apply it to everything. Skills, relationships, knowledge, health. Everything compounds in their minds. Mark Cuban didn't just invest money in the stock market. He invested time in learning about technology trends, invested energy in building relationships with entrepreneurs, invested focus in understanding market patterns. Every investment was designed to compound with every other investment. Here's the psychological trick. They see everything as either contributing to their compound growth or detracting from it. There's no neutral. When they meet someone new, they're thinking, how can this relationship compound? When they learn something new, they're thinking, how does this connect to everything else I know? This creates a psychological lens where they see opportunities for compound growth that other people miss. They invest in people before those people become successful. They learn about industries before those industries boom. They build skills that work together to create more value than the sum of their parts. I learned this lesson the hard way about 3 years ago. I was spending hours every day scrolling social media, telling myself it was research for my content. But when I really examined it, I realized none of that time was compounding. I wasn't building skills, relationships, or knowledge that connected to anything else in my life. It was just empty time. The day I deleted those apps and started spending that time reading books and learning skills was the day my income started growing. Not immediately, but that's the point. Compound growth is invisible at first. You can train your brain to think this way. Start asking, how can this compound? About everything you do. How can this skill compound with your other skills? How can this relationship compound with your other relationships? How can this knowledge compound with what you already know? But if you think that's a mind bender, wait until you hear how billionaires think about money that's just sitting still. Trick number 6, the money velocity psychology. Here's where billionaires think completely different from everyone else. They don't try to save money. They try to accelerate it. While most people think about how to keep money, billionaires think about how to move it faster. Ray Dalio doesn't have a savings account earning 2% interest. Every dollar he has is working, moving, creating value. If money sits still, it's not doing its job. This creates a completely different psychology around money management. Most people feel secure when they have money sitting in their account. Billionaires feel secure when their money is moving fast through profitable systems. They've trained their brains to feel nervous about stagnant money and excited about money in motion. This isn't about being reckless. It's about being strategic. They understand that money is a tool, not a goal. Tools are meant to be used, not stored. When you start thinking about money as a tool that should always be working, you make completely different decisions. Think of money like water in a river. Stagnant water becomes stale and starts to smell. It attracts mosquitoes and breeds problems. But moving water stays fresh, carves new paths, generates power, and creates life along its banks. Billionaires treat their money like a river that should always be flowing and creating something valuable wherever it goes. Instead of asking, how much should I save? Start asking, how fast can I get this money working? Instead of looking for the safest place to store money, look for the most productive place to deploy it. This shift in psychology changes everything about how you handle money. Now, this final psychological trick is the one that completely changed how I think about my own money, and it's probably the most counterintuitive thing you'll hear today. Trick number 7. The wealth thermometer reset. This is the most counterintuitive one, and it's the reason I changed how I think about my own money. Billionaires have reset their wealth thermometer. They don't measure wealth by how much they have. They measure it by how much they can give away. Bill Gates doesn't think he's wealthy because he has billions of dollars. He thinks he's wealthy because he can solve malaria in Africa. Warren Buffett doesn't measure his success by his net worth. He measures it by how much impact his donations will have after he's gone. This isn't just about being generous. It's about psychology. When your wealth is measured by what you can give, not what you can keep, you remove the mental ceiling on how much you can make. There's no such thing as enough. When you're measuring by impact instead of accumulation, most people have a psychological wealth ceiling. Somewhere in their subconscious, they think, I don't need more than X amount. This ceiling creates invisible limits on their actions and decisions. They stop pushing when they approach their ceiling. Billionaires have removed that ceiling by changing the measurement. There's no limit to how much good you can do in the world, so there's no limit to how much wealth you can build to do that good. Here's an unexpected story that shows this perfectly. In 1997, J.K. Rowling was a single mom on welfare, literally writing Harry Potter in cafes because she couldn't afford to heat her apartment. She could have easily set her wealth ceiling at enough to never worry about money again. Maybe a few $1 million. But she didn't. Even after making hundreds of millions from Harry Potter, she kept writing, kept creating, kept building her wealth. Why? Because she measures wealth by how many literacy programs she can fund, how many single mothers she can help, how many children she can inspire through her writing. Her wealth thermometer isn't calibrated to what she can keep. It's calibrated to what she can give. This psychological shift removes the guilt and fear that many people have around wanting more money. When you want money to create impact, not just comfort, your subconscious mind stops sabotaging your efforts to build wealth. Here's what hit me when I realized all this. We've been taught that rich people are greedy, that wanting money is shallow, that wealth corrupts people. But that's not what I found when I studied actual billionaires. They're not motivated by greed. They're motivated by a completely different relationship with money that most people can't even understand. They've rewired their brains to think about money in ways that seem alien to normal thinking patterns. And here's the real mind bender. These psychological tricks work at any income level. You don't need to be rich to start thinking like this. In fact, you need to start thinking like this to become rich. The money doesn't change the psychology. The psychology changes the money. I realized this about myself 6 months ago, when I caught myself making a decision based on scarcity instead of abundance. I was choosing the cheaper option for my business, not because it was better, but because I was afraid of spending money. That's when it hit me. I was still thinking like someone who's trying to protect money instead of someone who's trying to grow it. That single realization changed everything about how I make financial decisions. So there you have it. 7 psychological tricks that billionaires use without even realizing it most of the time. The delayed gratification reversal, the failure reframe system, the scarcity abundance flip, the identity economics shift, the compound interest mindset expansion, the money velocity psychology, and the wealth thermometer reset. These aren't just interesting ideas to think about. They're mental patterns you can actually install in your own brain. Start with whichever one resonates most with you. Practice it until it becomes automatic. Then add another one. The goal isn't to become a billionaire overnight. The goal is to start thinking like someone who builds wealth instead of someone who just dreams about it. Because once your psychology changes, your results start changing too. And that's when everything else becomes possible. Remember, every billionaire started with the same amount of money you have right now, 0. The difference was never the money. It was always the mindset. If this episode shifted how you think about money, imagine what happens when you start applying these psychological principles every single day. This is just the beginning of the Psychology of Money series, and we've got much more coming. From the hidden habits of self-made billionaires to the mindset shifts that quietly build real wealth. So if you're serious about transforming how you earn, spend, and think about money, hit that like button to support the channel. Share this with someone who needs a mindset upgrade. And subscribe so you don't miss the next episode. Turn on notifications, because each new episode is designed to change the way you see money forever.